Hello and welcome back, and that is right, it is time for the Plex Media Server testing on the new Synology DS923 Plus. This is a subject that has been something of a debate for quite a few months. We've been talking about the DS923 Plus arriving with the R1600 CPU inside that doesn't have integrated graphics, and I know a number of you are concerned about its performance as a Plex Media Server NAS, and that's what today's video is about. We are going to be squaring in almost completely on 4K multimedia throughout this testing. In the early stages, I'm going to chuck out some 1080p and 720, but take my word for it, they play fine. But today's video is going to be much like my other Plex Media Server tests, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail than normal because I know a number of you won't have watched the other Plex tests prior to this video and therefore may have missed in some of the background stuff. So I'm going to labour some of the little things to do with terminology and some of the stuff to do with codecs and compression just a little bit more, because I know a number of you watching this have not watched any of my other videos. Hello and welcome to the channel. So first and foremost, there is a question I'm always asked when I make these Plex Media Server test videos. Why, Delilah, do I record them here on a laptop screen in front of you? Now, as you can see, if you like, I'm recording this on OBS, and I'm right straight away, I can tell you right now, here I am in the background here, just working there, doing this video for you. Now, I could leave that there, but I'm going to need all these valuable visual resources there as I move me out of shot, because I'm going to need these visual resources to run today's Plex Media Server testing. By that, what I mean is, throughout our testing, we have to make sure that the load that's happening is we're trying to put all the work on the NAS. Not everyone's going to be running a Plex Media Server NAS the same. Some people are going to be utilizing a Plex NAS that's going to be running on an Amazon. You're going to be watching it on a smart TV or an Amazon Fire Stick or a Roku box or something like that, or even on a mobile phone. And in all of those different scenarios, the way your data is handled changes, and a big part of that is to do with conversions. So the media we're going to be utilizing today, if we go into the file station area there for our Plex Media Server testing, comes in a variety of different formats. Again, you can fast forward 2 or 3 minutes if you already know most of this anyway to the testing. But for example, here are 4K tests here. They're all vary in size and scale, and if you like, we can go straight into the Plex Media Server that we've already set up and have a look at the files there. They're all listed there, all have different variables and attributes, and indeed we've got the view of it there. Let's open that up a little bit more, and as you can see, all of these are very different kind of file formats that we've got available to us here. Now, what's intriguing about this is some of them are a different file format. Now, there's this thing here, H.265, and other ones are listed as H.264. Now, if we zoom out there and go back, we're able to see the slight difference there, opening that boundary up, bring that open there, slide over, get rid of you, there we go, and so we can see some of them are H.264 and some of them are H.265 or HEVC. H.264 is a compression technique that is used for multimedia that's in the cinema and IMAX and giant screens to be compressed into something you can watch from your sofa. It's largely open source and everyone can use it. HEVC, otherwise known as H.264, HEVC stands for Highly Efficient Video Codec, is a compression technique that takes those big files that are even bigger in more modern times and compresses them. But HEVC is owned and was developed by a conglomerate that has resulted in multiple users having the ownership, the patent on it, and therefore you need a license to play back these multimedia files. Now, this license is generally purchased individually. You can't, most hardware clients do not arrive with it by default, and therefore if your multimedia collection has a lot of HEVC media in it, the result is this media is tougher to play because the system needs to convert it into a multimedia compression technique like H.264 in order to play back the file. This is going to be really important later. The next really important thing is a lot of you, when you ask about me playing it in the web browser, ask, why do I not just use the client, such as a client on Fire Stick or the client for Windows or the client for Android? Now, the reason for that is that if I use a client device, then the hard work to play back some of the denser files. So if we go into a 4K file here, we go for those 4K trailers as mentioned earlier on, and we go into them there, and we play back one of those files. Let's list the library, and we select a file here that's quite dense. So if we go for the Beauty of Taiwan here, and we play back this file, this is quite a tough little file. We can see that the file is playing immediately. Down there, it's playing straight away, and it's playing in the original format. It's doing that because this is able to use my laptop's power. So when you're using a client device like this, and my laptop does have HEVC support, it's able to use the client hardware in order to play back the file. So if you are playing the file on a device that has an HEVC license or is powerful enough and allows client-side conversions, then this will be fine for you. But I can't use this tool to play back these files because it doesn't accurately depict how the NAS is playing it. I need the NAS to be doing the hard lifting, so those of you that don't have hardware clients that are powerful enough or have HEVC licenses to play back this file have a realistic understanding of how well this NAS, the DS923 Plus, will play these files. That's why I don't use client apps, and that's why I always do it in the web browser, and it's the fairest way to show the actual NAS's capability in playing a file. This system arrives with a dual-core R1600 processor there. Again, it's an AMD-based processor there, and the system is running on 4 gig of memory that can be upgraded to 32 gig as needed. So, as mentioned, we're going to play these files. Now, real quick, the reason we're not including 1080p in these, because I've already tested 1080p files and stuff like that on these, and they've ran absolutely fine. There's no reason to play them here. They're going to run fine on this. 720p, 1080p, they run fine. But 4K, on the other hand, in previous videos I have used the Jellyfish files, and I may return to them later on, but the Jellyfish files are just too darn complex. Very few NASes can play back these files. They're just too dense. Now, that isn't to say that it's not capable. If we look at the 100 megabits per second 1080p file in H.264, we're able to see by playing that file here and open it up at the bottom there, playing at that original quite dense codec there, that if we're playing it, the CPU is starting to grow, and it will play the file eventually, but as you see, it's not going to play it straight away. And again, this is because of the density of that file, and a 100 megabits per second file, even in 1080p, is not common. This is incredibly uncommon and quite rare file type that only particular high-end enthusiasts are going to own. That's why we're not including those files in today's test. But heading back to our 4K trailers, we've got our 11 files to play. I know which ones I think are going to play well, and unfortunately I know which ones are probably going to struggle. So let's start with file number 1. This is Cave of Wonders. Again, this, if we play this file and we open it up here at the bottom, this is an H.264 file here. It's running in 4K and it's playing in its original 12, or I think it was 16 megabits per second, but it's a decimal on there, playing with its original multimedia quality. As we can see, if we open up the task manager, the only thing that's going to be taxing my local system here while this is playing is OBS. So we go to the processes there, we go to the apps, we can see it's OBS and indeed Chrome. That's still a heavy load, but nowhere near what we saw before. And remember, OBS, screen recording there in the background all the time. But as we can see, this file, it's a bit slow, trust me, it is playing, but right there, we're seeing the 4K file. We're not seeing too much of an impact on the CPU or memory, and overall, this is absolutely fine. If we skip forward and see how well it reacts, it's still able to immediately skip forward there with very little impact there on what's happening there on the system. So we can come out of that file there with our first test, an H.264 file, largely successful. And again, we can move on to our next one. And this is where things get tough. This is Roast Duck. This is an H.265 file. And the frame rate on this is also quite aggressive. So if we open that up there, we didn't want to full screen that. We open up there at the bottom, we can see that the system has had to convert it because of that HEVC component there and that not being on board. Now again, CPU utilization has gone absolutely bananas there, and this is what I mean about using a CPU that does not have integrated graphics there on board. If you are in a situation where you are reliant on server-side conversions. Again, that's if you do not have a supported HEVC license, or if you have a system that has the power but doesn't allow client-side conversions. This is what you're going to expect. And as you can see, it did a really good job of playing the file, but it's had to pause as it kind of catches its breath a bit in order to convert that file. It's still playing it in 4K, but it's had to change it to an H.264, and it is that hard work that's caused that delay in the playback there. So again, it's slowly catching up, with the light orange being native kind of chronological playback and the dark orange being conversion. But as you can see, it's hitting that wall there. And that is, again, where that issue surrounding integrated graphics and conversions rears its head. You might be a user that's not taking advantage of that doesn't need conversions. You're running on an NVIDIA Shield or an Xbox that has the option to buy an HEVC compression license, or you can use client-side, or you have no intention of using transcoding. But there are users out there that want to stream media while on the train while commuting. There are users out there that do not have client hardware that can play HEVC. These are the users where this big bar here on the CPU is going to matter. So number 3, if we open it up there, and again, we'll get the chart there on screen, another HEVC file, another 30 megabits per second. This is an MKV file rather than an MP4. And again, we're seeing that spike. Now, I should highlight, while we're very early on in the testing, this isn't what the whole video is going to be like. As soon as you start playing H.264, even in my earlier testing, things played absolutely fine there. But there's still no avoiding this large degree of utilization there when we're trying to play back these HEVC files without the native license. Now, I'm going to leave this tab for a moment so it will have a chance to catch up. As you see, this is the same file that we played on the client application that played fine. And again, that's why we don't include those client applications in our testing, because it doesn't give the whole picture of how things are able to be played if you do rely on that conversion. As you can see, we've got that hanging there in the middle, and I will highlight, some of you will mention that Synology does provide an advanced media convention in their App Center that allows a supported codec of HEVC, but it's worth highlighting that that is only effective to Synology services. So again, it's worth highlighting that in mind, and again, the impact of that is not completely felt outside of that, and therefore in PLEX, even though we've got the license applied and enabled, we're not getting the frame rate, we're not getting the support of HEVC that you might think based on that app. But nonetheless, I can't really call this a success because the conversion is taking longer than organic playback on this file. So let's go to our next test. This is Wonder Woman. Again, this is an H.264 file, so it will play in the original quality. I foresee no problems here. It's a bit rate of just over 16 megabits per second. And it's absolutely fine there. It's going to play the file. It's playing it in original quality. And again, we're seeing that CPU go back down to the original low-end utilization there. It's still absolutely fine there. No problems to report. And overall, really happy with what we're seeing there in terms of PLEX performance. Again, we can go ahead, skip forward with this 4K file there. It's going to be a slight delay while it catches up for later on in the multimedia file. So it's seeing a delay there of now around 3 seconds, but again, skipping forward, absolutely fine. The conversion is outpacing organic playback, and the CPU utilization is absolutely fine there. Bear in mind, while I'm doing this, the NAS does have a lot of other applications sitting there in the background, either in hibernation or active. So the fact that it's still able to do this with some of those apps running is still very impressive indeed. So let's come out of Wonder Woman file there and now go into June. This is another H.265 file now, and this has half the bit rate of the files that we were looking at earlier on. We can open it up there. This has also a very complex default audio stream. I'm not going to change that to a lesser one. But as you can see, we're playing this file. It's running at 21 megabits per second as opposed to 30 and 60 that we've seen earlier. We're seeing that oh so familiar CPU spike at this point. We can also state that memory isn't playing a tremendous part here, because as long as you've got 2 to 4 gig of memory, you're absolutely fine on PLEX. And it is playing the file, but once again, we're seeing playback outpacing that of conversions, and therefore we're seeing the delay there in the middle of the screen there. So very hard to call this a success. Coming out there, we can try our next file, which is Spider-Man No Way Home. This is an IMAX 4K trailer in H.264. So it's playing in the original 30 plus megabits per second quality at 2160p. It's a 4K file. So it's a denser bit rate. Remember, when we played the 1080p file right at the beginning in our early stages while going through the disclaimers, that was 100 megabits per second at 1080p. This isn't 1080p, it's 4K, but it is still 30 plus megabits per second bit rate. But after a slight delay, we are seeing it play, and the lining up of the file is still massively outpacing that of playback there. And again, the CPU is starting to reset itself there on the side. Absolutely fine there. Overall, you know, easy going success for me there. Next up, we make our way into a terrible film, The Rise of Skywalker. And again, this is an H.264 file. Again, higher bit rate this time at 41.5 megabits per second. And this time, we're just going to immediately skip forward later into this file. Give it a few seconds to play catch up. We're seeing the slight spike there due to that higher bit rate there as it's gone forward, skipping ahead. But still, nonetheless, playing fine, running there in the background. It's running. The lining up, the buffering of the file is still outpacing playback, even though it's running quite a complex audio stream there. And overall, I am definitely going to call that one a success, unlike the film, which definitely wasn't. Next up, we've got the Batman trailer. From there, again, another H.264 file. This is 8-bit there, and it's a 32 megabits per second file. Running over here, we're seeing the CPU take a little bit of a run up there, but again, after the tiniest fraction of a delay, we're seeing it happening there, and we're seeing the buffering and the lining up of that file outpacing that of organic playback. Overall, still a fantastic success for me there, even though if there was the tiniest spike there early doors, I'd say that's absolutely fine. Next, we're going on to Black Panther Wakanda. This is another H.265 one there. And again, this is quite a dense little trailer. If we go into the conversion there, it's up to 54.4 megabits per second, listed as a 60 megabits per second trailer during the conversion. To convert this into an H.264, it has lowered the bit rate ever so slightly, and it is trying. We're seeing that buffering there happening in the background, but it's taken longer than 8 seconds to line up and convert 8 seconds of footage. Even though the file is playing, we're almost certainly going to see the little orange circle of doom there in the middle as it plays. And as we slowly close in, and we can see there, it just wasn't able to keep pace with that conversion there overall. And the CPU utilization incredibly high there on the right hand side. Can't really call that a success. And again, just another example of H.265 being troublesome here. Again, we're moving to the Avengers trailer here. This is a 50 megabits per second file in H.264. And again, running in the original quality there, we're seeing the CPU reset itself after the horrible difficulty of playing an H.265 file there, and resetting itself a little bit more palatably down here on the bottom right. It's taken a little bit of a delay there to play the file, but we are starting to see that conversion, the buffering of that file outpacing that of playback. But it is closing in, and I think we're going to see a delay. So there we go. This was another example, just a slight hitch there, largely down to that enhanced bit rate there. It should also be highlighted, this file does have quite an enhanced audio track being run in there, and I could have lowered it down, but I'm not going to. But still, nonetheless, we're starting to see when the bit rate is the breaking point there. Slightly away from the H.264 versus HEVC debate in conversions. I will highlight that the bit rate of around anything above 40 megabits per second bit rate on your media, that is when the CPU, the R1600, clearly has something of a hurdle to overcome, which doesn't strictly manage to do a lot of the time. But overall, I'm gonna call this mostly a success, because after that early hitching jumping point there, which could well be to do with not a full recovery from not giving ourselves a cool down moment between those playbacks, but still nonetheless, I'm going to call it mostly a success there. Which brings us on to our last file, and this is the daddy file. I don't think this system will play this file, but this is the Top Gun Maverick trailer. This is an IMAX 4K high-end file at 80 megabits per second. It is an H.264 file, not 265, but It's a very dense, and this is the file we use to demonstrate what I'm talking about with the bit rate there. With the bit rate, that much data being pushed into every second, after, above 40, we start to see those problems. And even though this is an 8264 and it should be able to manage it, because of that enhanced bit rate and that handling, we're just seeing that CPU just have difficulty pushing through this data in that same way. And again, had we been running a more aggressive or integrated graphics CPU, it would still be able to play it. An Intel Celeron might still struggle with this file, and we will of course be doing comparisons between the DS93 Plus and the DS920 Plus from 2020, a comparison a lot of you are making, but still nonetheless, I'm hesitant to call this a success overall for Plex Media Server, because look at it, it's just hitting something of a brick wall. Now, we could, if we choose, go ahead and convert and allow the system to try and convert that file. And on a Celeron or integrated graphics CPU, this would be, a simple playback way round. But as you can see, now we've introduced conversions, and that CPU not having integrated graphics, it's being forced to use raw CPU power to get the job done, of which it's just not suitable for this kind of action. And I think that's the big point in today's video. It's about what your multimedia is. Are you utilizing HEVC media exclusively or to a large degree? And are you going to need server-side conversions? Once again, if you are using hardware clients, that is the devices you're watching your media on, with HEV licenses in place, much like my laptop did with the client app that we saw at the beginning, or you're using a device like an Xbox that allows you to download the license, or you're using a system that can enable client-side transcoding or conversions and is powerful enough to take the hit, then you're going to be absolutely fine. But if you're going to be doing a lot of transcoding that requires the NAS to do the work, or you're going to be playing multimedia on devices that does not support HEVC, this NAS might not be suitable for you and your Plex Media Server setup. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully the guide and the written test results of Plex Media Server are linked in the description, as well as the full review to this device. If you want to learn more, we've done lots of videos on the 923 and other NASs in Plex, so do check them out. Hopefully this is in the playlist, or click subscribe as we cover the subject of NAS more and more. Otherwise, a few things. One, if you need some free advice on your Plex Media Server NAS, what's the best one for your setup, use the free advice section linked in the description below, or use the free community forum Ask NAS Compares. NAS Compares is ran by just me and Eddie, and we're here to help you as much as we can. But bear in mind, it's first come, first serve. It may take us a little while to get to your question. Finally, if this video or any of my videos has helped you choose the right data storage solution for you, and if you are planning to buy from Amazon anyway, make sure those two things are true. If that is true for you, then please use the links to Amazon in the description. If you use those links, it doesn't cost you anything extra, and anything you buy results in a small sum of money coming from Amazon to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares, which helps us continuing doing what we do. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.